So I've been thinking a lot about privacy lately, and especially when it comes to love. Because somewhere between wanting to protect your peace and wanting to be seen, there's this weird gray area. I used to think keeping things private meant protecting them, that if I guarded something close enough, it couldn't be ruined by the outside world. That silence somehow made it sacred. But there's a difference between protecting something and hiding it. And I learned that the hard way. It's the modern love dilemma, though, right? We want soft love, safe love, real love, but we also want to keep it quiet enough to not have to explain it if it all falls apart. And honestly, I get that because once you've had a public heartbreak, privacy starts to feel like this armor that you can put on your relationship. Someone wanting to keep you private, it almost sounds flattering. It sounds like peace, like maturity, like they're trying to build something real without the noise of other people's opinions. And sometimes that's exactly what it is, and it's perfect. But it can also take a turn, and that quiet can start to feel heavy. Maybe sound less like peace and more like avoidance. At first, it feels like a good thing. Like keeping it quiet would mean actually just focusing on each other, love with intention, if you will. But somewhere in the middle of that shift, you can start noticing the small things that staying private keep you away from, like maybe how you never met as friends or how your name never comes up in conversations, how there were no pictures, no tags, no, this is my girlfriend moment. No meeting the parents. It's like, it's the kind of quiet that you can still romanticize if you wanted to. But it's also the kind of quiet that starts to echo when you realize no one knows who you really are. I remember one night after we had broken up in my last relationship, and one of my friends asked how I was doing. And I told her about the situation that I was in currently, and her response was, "I didn't even know that you had a boyfriend. You never posted him." And as I sat there trying to convince her, and more so myself, that the lack of it didn't mean anything, but it did. It had been 3 years, and I had wanted to post him. I just wasn't allowed. But when you love someone, you don't make them feel like they're the part of your life that has to stay unseen. You start to internalize that invisibility. Like maybe you are too much or too complicated or not quite right enough to be shown off. Like, why are we not introducing each other to friends? And that's when you realize the difference between privacy and secrecy. One protects the relationships piece, the other protects someone else's secret life. So, welcome back to Chasing Stability, where today we're talking all about that fine line between privacy and hiding, and how easy it is to confuse the two when your heart's just looking for something steady. We're going to talk about what healthy privacy looks like, when it starts to turn into secrecy, and how to tell when someone's, "I just want to keep this between us," really means, "I just don't want to claim this." Because sometimes what looks like maturity is really just manipulation with really, really good branding. And the thing about being kept a secret is that it doesn't just make you question them, it also makes you question yourself. You start pulling back too, trying not to look too invested or too emotional, like you're trying to match their detachment. And before you know it, you've built a whole relationship inside this like perfect little box that's hidden and quiet and small. All the things love was never really supposed to be. That's what we're unpacking today. The difference between love that's being protected and love that's being hidden. Because when someone really wants to love you, they don't keep you a secret from the rest of the world for no reason at all. And I'll be honest, for a long time, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like 3 years is a pretty long time to give someone the benefit of the doubt. I told myself maybe he was protecting something sacred, or maybe he'd just been through enough that he didn't want to let people in. Maybe he really believed that keeping things quiet would keep them safe, that letting the world in would somehow ruin us. And I get all of those things because we all know what it's like to have too many voices in your business, right? When everyone has an opinion and suddenly, like, your love starts feeling like a group project when really their opinions don't matter. So I convinced myself that his privacy meant peace, that maybe he was just healing out loud in his own way. And when you love someone, you'll justify just about anything if it helps you keep believing it's healthy. But I've learned that when privacy is rooted in love, it feels safe. When it's rooted in fear, it feels like you're walking on those really thin eggshells. And looking back, I realized there were signs of both. There were moments that felt genuine, the late night talks and the inside jokes and the little world that existed just between him and I. But there were also the nights I sat in our living room wondering why I still felt so invisible and irrelevant in his life, why my world kept shrinking to fit inside his secrecy. That's when I realized something really hard. You can't build something real when one person is busy hiding the foundation. It's easy to call it maturity, to say, we're just not like other couples, or we don't need to post everything. But if you're honest with yourself, you know the difference between keeping it private and keeping it a secret. Private feels extremely grounding for you and that relationship. Secret feels suffocating. And at first, I didn't know how to tell the two apart. I genuinely still struggle looking back on all of it and trying to figure out what was truly real from my perspective now. I wanted to believe I was part of something deep, something private because it mattered, not because it was convenient for him. So I stayed quiet. I stopped bringing it up. I started convincing myself that being hidden was a sign of emotional depth instead of emotional distance. I remember one night early on, we were like out to dinner and we were like tucked away in the back of the restaurant, dim lights, no one around, super, super late to be going to dinner. It felt nice and intimate at first. And it was our real first date, even though we'd been together for months. But as soon as we saw someone we knew, his whole energy shifted. He leaned back, he moved his hand away from mine, acted like we were just kind of friends. And got irritated that people we knew were now going to know that we were together. And in that tiny moment, it felt like the air left my chest because there's nothing lonelier than being next to someone who's pretending not to be with you. It was the root of our real first fight. And I had no idea what I had done wrong other than just be there. That's when it should have hit me. It wasn't privacy. This was protection, but not for our relationship. It was protection for him, his comfort, his convenience. And that kind of love, it's not love that lasts. And now I can look back and see it differently. I don't think he was trying to like hurt me. I genuinely think he was trying to manage his own insecurities. But some people hide things not because they're ashamed of you, but because they're still ashamed of themselves. They're afraid of being seen or of being judged or of not being ready for what real love honestly requires. But even if that's true, it still doesn't make it fair. Because the lesson in all of this right here, in maybe the hardest one for me, is that it's not your job to make someone feel safe enough to claim you. You can't prove your worth to somebody who benefits from keeping you in the shadows. Even if it truly is for his insecurities, but definitely if it was like to hide that he was cheating or whatever. I'll never know the truth from my experience. But if I had to guess, I'd say it was a little bit maybe of both. So if you're in that space right now, trying to convince yourself that the silence is protection, I hope you pause for a second and really ask yourself, does this quiet feel safe or does it feel small? Because real love doesn't need to be broadcasted to be real. Sure, that's a very true statement, but it should never have to be hidden to survive. That's a pretty good point. There's a point where you stop feeling like you're in something private and start realizing you're just kind of like invisible, where I'm just a private person starts sounding less like a boundary and more like a cover story. And when you love someone, that realization doesn't hit all at once. It sneaks up on you in like little moments, like in the hesitation before you reach for their hand in public, in the way your name never comes up when they're talking about their day, and how every good moment feels like a secret you're not allowed to celebrate. At first, you tell yourself it's fine. You say things like, oh, he's just taking it slow, or he's protecting our peace, or he's been hurt before, so he's healing. And maybe all of that's true, but it doesn't make it any less lonely because there's something soul crushing about being loved in silence, about showing up for someone who won't show up for you when it counts. And eventually you start to feel the weight of it all. Like your heart's been whispering, this isn't love, while your mind keeps making excuses. I remember how small I started to feel as it drifted toward the end. It wasn't loud, it was super subtle, and it was me shrinking without realizing it. I stopped talking about him to my friends because I didn't want to deal with the questions. I stopped expecting anything more from him because deep down I knew I wasn't going to get it. 3 years. I never met his family. I never met his friends. They never saw my name. They never saw my face. Nothing. No tags, no photos, no pictures. No, this is her in public. Just moments that lived in private corners where no one could ever see them. And I told myself that I was fine, that maybe what we had didn't need proof, that being known quietly could still mean being loved deeply. But that's the thing about convincing yourself. Eventually, the story stops holding up, and you start wondering what's so wrong with being seen. You start questioning why every piece of your relationship has to exist behind these closed doors. And then one day, you realize you've stopped asking altogether, not because you're at peace with the situation, but because you're exhausted. I wasn't calm, I was numb. And that numbness, I kept calling it peace, but really it was just me learning how to disappear so I wouldn't have to face how small he made me truly feel. That's the thing about being hidden. You start hiding from yourself too. Love that's afraid to be seen usually has something to hide. And the moment you feel like you have to earn visibility, that's the moment it stops being love and starts being control. Because people who love you right won't just hold you close, they'll hold you up. They'll make sure the world knows where they stand. Even if they're not loud about it, love doesn't need an audience, but it should never require your silence. And the hardest part is you don't even realize how much it changes until you finally step out of it and have to look back. That's when you start noticing how much lighter everything feels, how much more space there is to breathe. It's like you were living in grayscale and suddenly the color comes back to your world. Because when you've been dimmed long enough, even your light starts to feel too bright at first. You have to remind yourself you were never too much or the reason that you were being kept a secret. You were just trying to be loved by someone who didn't know what to do with enough. And if you're in that place now, half visible, half claim, or waiting for someone to decide what you mean to them, You don't need to earn a spotlight in someone's life just to feel chosen. And the people who are meant for you, they won't make you guess if you belong there in any way, shape, or form. When I finally stepped back from that relationship, I started asking myself the questions we all eventually get to when we're in this situation. Why? Why do people hide love that's supposed to be good? Why do they work so hard to keep something that's supposed to make them proud under wraps? And the truth is, it's not always a simple answer. Some people hide out of fear of judgment, fear of repeating old mistakes, fear of what other people might say if they knew the whole story. For some, it's about reputation. They've built this image of who they're supposed to be with, and loving you doesn't fit that picture. And for others, it's pain. They've been hurt before. So now they keep everything at arm's length, not realizing that in trying to protect themselves, they're severely hurting someone else. And then sometimes it's not fear or insecurity, it's deceit. It's the ones living two lives, the ones who keep you in the dark because they know that bringing you into the light would expose what they're really doing. They'll call it privacy, but it's really strategy. They're not protecting the relationship, they're protecting their lie. And when you finally start to see it for what it is, the silence hits different. It's not mystery, it's manipulation. I think about that a lot. How fear and deceit can both make people act like love is something they have to manage instead of nurture. They'll say they care, but the second it starts to require courage, they disappear into themselves. And you're left sitting there trying to decode a silence that has nothing to do with you and what you've brought to the table. Because that's what secrecy does. It confuses your worth and where you're standing and what you mean. You start thinking, if I were more patient, maybe he'd be more proud. If I were easier to love, maybe he'd claim me. But that's not love's job to prove. And it's not your responsibility to heal someone who's still hiding behind their past. When you love someone who's afraid to be seen, it's easy to think your patience will be what changes them. But love doesn't cure fear, truth does. And the truth is, if someone's not ready to be honest about who you are to them, then they're not ready for the kind of love that requires accountability. I've learned that fear and love can't live in the same space for long. One eventually pushes the other out. And the ones who choose fear, they end up alone. Not because no one wants to love them, but because they never let themselves be known enough to receive it. They push everyone away. And I'll be real for just a couple seconds here. After this past relationship, I swung to the other extreme of that for a while. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be posted, tagged, claimed, and introduced, to never question again if someone was proud to have me around or be with me. Because when you've been hidden that long, visibility starts to feel like extreme validation. But being seen and being safe aren't always the same thing, as most of us know, right? Privacy, when it's healthy, is one of the most beautiful parts of a relationship. It's not about keeping secrets, it's about keeping peace. It's about that quiet space where your connection grows without the noise of the outside world opinions. Because let's be honest, people will always have something to say about your relationship if you allow it to come in. And when you start building for real, you don't want every foundation brick picked apart by strangers or your friends, whatever, who don't live in your house. Not every moment is meant for public consumption. Some things deserve to stay safe, to be protected, especially while they're still forming. There's something really special about having a relationship that feels like it's all yours, where you don't have to prove it with posts or oversharing because you actually trust it. You know where you stand. So you don't need everyone else to understand that. It's not about hiding, right? That's about holding the boundary, holding your peace, holding something close because it's too valuable to let everyone's hands just like grab at it. I think the difference is this, though, between these narratives. When you're being hidden, you feel small. When it's privacy, you feel secure. Hidden love makes you question everything. Private love makes you like exhale and never have to think about it. It's the kind where you can still be seen, still be celebrated, but you get to decide who gets access to that joy. It's quiet confidence, not silence. It's peace, not secrecy. Now, when I think about love, I don't want this kind that needs the audience, but I also don't want the kind that needs excuses. I want something that exists in the middle ground, visible enough to be real, private enough to stay pure. Because the right person won't make you choose between being protected and being proud. They'll know how to do both and do them so you feel safe. The hardest part about leaving a love that kept you small is realizing how much of yourself you left in the shadows too. You start to see all the ways you dimmed your light just to fit into someone else's like little world. And at first it's disorienting because stepping back into visibility feels extremely vulnerable. You start asking yourself things like, how much of me is safe to show to people now? Can I trust myself to love again without losing myself in the process like last time? Healing after being hidden isn't just about getting over them, it's about remembering you. It's about realizing that your softness was never the problem. Your willingness to love loudly was never too much. The wrong person just wasn't ready for that kind of honesty. And for me, it took a long time to stop over explaining, to stop apologizing for wanting to be acknowledged. Because when you've spent years being minimized, you start treating your own needs like inconveniences. You start asking for minimal and calling it grace. But grace doesn't mean disappearing. Grace just means knowing you can forgive the situation without shrinking from it ever again. And when you finally get to that place, the one where you're no longer angry, you're just like kind of aware of it all, that's where the peace starts to settle in. That's when you realize that being hidden wasn't a reflection of your own worth, it was a reflection of someone else's stuff that they are just pushing down so hard. You stop taking it personally. You stop blaming yourself. And instead of chasing closure, you start choosing clarity of the situation. You realize that healing isn't about proving they lost something good. It's about remembering you never needed to be found. Because when you truly start to heal, you stop waiting for someone to choose you out loud and you start choosing yourself fully and unapologetically. You start showing up for your own life again, posting what you want, going where you want, speaking how you want. You stop asking for permission to be visible. And little by little, you start seeing your light come back again. Not because someone turned it back on for you, but because you finally stopped dimming it yourself. And once you start to heal, the goal shifts. It's no longer about proving you're over them. It's about protecting your peace without disappearing again. And that's a tricky balance because when you've been hidden, the pendulum naturally swings the other way. You want to shout your growth from the rooftop. You want everyone to see that you're not broken, that you survived it all. But peace doesn't always have to be quiet, and presence doesn't always have to be loud and in people's face. Protecting your peace means learning what deserves access to you. It's saying, I don't owe everyone my story just because they're curious, but it's also saying, I won't hide my happiness just because someone else might not understand it. It's living open handed, not guarded, not performative, just grounded. because you can be peaceful and still present. You can be private without being invisible. When I think about love now, I don't want the kind that silences me or overwhelms me. I want the kind that steadies me, something that lets me show up fully, but also softly, without the noise, without the hiding, without the constant explaining of who I am. Because peace isn't about isolation, it's about intention. It's knowing when to pull back and when to let people in, and being confident enough to trust yourself to know the difference. That's the version of love I'm protecting now. Not the one that hides, not the one that performs, but the one that just is peaceful, present, proud, and that's what I hope for you too. I hope that you find a version of love and life that doesn't require you to shrink just to keep the peace. One that lets you show up fully, even if your voice shakes a little at first. Because peace shouldn't mean disappearing, it should mean coming home to yourself. So if you've ever been the person who felt hidden and unseen or undervalued, I hope this reminds you that you were never the problem. You were just standing in a space too small to hold your light. And the beauty of healing is that you get to decide how visible you want to be from here on out. You get to create the kind of love that feels safe and seen, the kind that doesn't need proof to be real, but also doesn't need to be erased to exist. And here's what I want to leave you with today: the right love won't make you question your worth. It won't hide you to protect itself. It'll meet you in the light where peace doesn't come from silence, but comes from being seen fully and freely. All right. And that's how we're going to leave it today. So go romanticize your peace, post something that makes you laugh or extremely happy, and don't let anyone convince you that being seen is a bad thing, especially if that's what you want to do. If this episode made you feel seen, share it with your friends, share it with the world, or whoever needs the reminder that privacy is cool, but hiding people definitely isn't. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure you're following Chasing Stability wherever you're listening to it right now, but also on social medias over on TikTok and Instagram. Leave a comment. I'd love to interact with you guys and know everything that you feel about the episodes and everything we talk about. I love you all so much. Thank you so much again for being here today. This is Chasing Stability, and I'll meet you in the in-between next Tuesday.